So without further ado, I will turn you over to the finalists of this year's Denny All-Ireland Schools competition. These are the minutes I've read.
Would anyone have any objection to me signing these minutes as a true and accurate reflection of the goings on of the society? It's a formality. I can't sign it, it's a laptop, I'll just type my name in later. As Shane told you, this is the first time that this competition has ever ventured forth out of the pale, I suppose, and down to us. We're extraordinarily proud to be hosting this evening. And in our chair, to take my place, because I'm decidedly average, we have a councillor from Cork South Central, Mr. Chris O'Leary.
Thank you very much. You sent the sticker might spend money. I suppose, first of all, I suppose just to set some ground rules, if you didn't know already. Speeches will be 7 minutes in length, and the first and the last minute of which will be protected. We would ask all speakers to be courteous to each other, no rowdiness. And we will lead on to the motion. Oh yes, thank you very much. I suppose just to go through the teams first. First crop, CDC Monkstown, Michael Barton. The opposing team will lead off with Charlotte Smith. Second crop team from Rockwell College will be Joe Doberman, and the second up will be Dottie Higgard, and the first crop individuals will be from St. Aloysius College, Zoe Fanon, and first up individual will be from CDS Monkstown, that's Austin Hanlon. Second prop individual will be from Clorsta Egnos, Andrew Ford. And second prop will be individual from Mercy High, Skibbereen, and that's Nave O'Driscoll. We'll proceed with the motion at this stage. That this House would abolish the minimum wage, and we call it the first crop to leave.
Okay, good afternoon or good evening everybody. My name is Mike and my partner Kevin and I are here today to speak in proposition of the motion that this House will abolish the minimum wage. I'm going to speak under three main points tonight. The first is unemployment and how the minimum wage creates it. The second has to do with the right to work. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the nature of the free market. But first, I'll bring you a very simple model, which is simply that we would abolish all minimum wage altogether. So, for my first point, unemployment. We believe that the minimum wage creates unemployment in two ways. It does so on an individual and on a collective basis. First, individually. The minimum wage creates a situation whereby it is illegal for someone to be employed for less than €7.65 an hour. We think that creates a problem as soon as someone comes along whose skill set does not allow them to earn that sum. Because if I can't get a job at €7.65, if I can't find a business for whom it is economically viable to pay me that sum for an hour of work, then the government has decreed that I don't have the right to work for any less of my own accord. I don't have that right, and therefore, if I can't get a job at minimum wage, then I don't get to work. So we think that, we think this is essentially unfair. It's a discriminatory way of preventing specific individuals from entering the market. It's discriminatory in the sense that what you're doing is pricing people out of the labour market based on their capacity to earn. That's unequitable. We think it's absolutely unfair. We think it's absolutely unacceptable. Secondly, the minimum wage creates unemployment on a more collective or corporate basis. What it does is it artificially inflates the running costs or the cost of doing business in Ireland. And the problem with this is, what happens is Irish people thinking of entering enterprise have noticed that it's become a lot less profitable, a lot less worthwhile, and therefore a lot less attractive to be an employer, and therefore they don't become employers. Foreign people notice, who are thinking of investing in Ireland or another EU state, they'll notice Ireland hovering near the top of the EU minimum wage list, and they won't invest here. So, in this way, the minimum wage is a disincentive to enterprise in Ireland. It's a barrier to job creation, and it's a huge source of economic stagnation, because it makes it a lot less attractive for companies to come here, to create jobs, and thereby, obviously to provide people with employment. So, in these two ways, the minimum wage is hugely harmful to potentially willing workers, because what it does is, it makes it harder for many people who are happy to have a job to get one. I think that's a problem. Now, for my second point, the right to work, I'd like to talk about why, in moral terms, we don't think that's acceptable on the part of the government. So, first of all, when the government tells me that if I can't get a job at 70 or 65, then I'm not entitled to say, well, I'll work for a little less than that because I really want a job. When they tell me that I can't make the decision, but that they can impose a minimum wage upon me, what they're saying is that they have a right to value me, but I don't have a right to value myself. And this is a huge problem, because we think that if anyone's going to assess my worth, if anyone's going to value me in that way, I'm the only person who can make that decision, because it's hugely subjective. I'm the only person who's lived my life. I'm the only person who knows how much the job in question means to me. I'm the only person, I'll take you in a sec, I'm the only person who knows how important this job is to me, how much I need to earn in order to be fulfilled, and therefore I'm the only person who is qualified to make this decision about my life. Yes, please.
The minimum wage is actually in place to ensure a living wage so that people are able to survive on the amount of money that they earn.
No, I disagree actually. I think that's what social welfare is in place for. I think we set minimum standards of wage in that sense. And second, I'm going to talk a little bit later on about how I don't think that we need a minimum wage in order to ensure that people get the money that they need. I'm going to establish that in my third point about the free market. So as I was saying, I'm the only person who is qualified or entitled to value me, to value my work, to decide what I want to work for. And the government doesn't have that right. We do believe in a right to work. We believe in a right to the dignity associated with employment. We believe in a right to feel like you're contributing to society, to feel like you're a part of society. We believe in a right to feel like you're providing for yourself, like you're self-sufficient in that way, you're not dependent, no thanks. And we believe in a right to feel like you're providing for those around you, to feel like you're providing for your loved ones. All of those things we believe are important. We think they're necessary for psychological fulfillment, for personal fulfillment, and therefore that people are entitled to them. We believe in the right to work, and we believe it's a right that the government has to protect. We also believe, however, that the provision of all our rights is always attendant upon the provision of certain freedoms as well. For example, my freedom of expression would not be fulfilled if I was told how to express myself, or if I was told what to say. That wouldn't be the fulfillment of that right. And in that exact way, my right to work is not fulfilled when my capacity to do so is being restricted arbitrarily by my government. My right to work is not being fulfilled when decisions which are decisions which have a bearing on my life, affect my happiness more than anyone else's, are taken away from me, are appropriated by the state. My right to work is not fulfilled when any decision that I'm allowed to make about my life is the kind of lesser of two evils call between leaving the country and going on social welfare. We don't think that entails the provision of my rights. I think what it is rights being taken away. It's my right to work being infringed, and it's my state utterly failing to protect me as an individual, and utterly failing to protect my rights, or protect my interests, and therefore utterly failing in their responsibility. Now, for my final point, I'm going to talk a little bit about the nature of the free market. Because we'd like to establish, first of all, that we think that a free market, and this was kind of raised in that point of information, we think that a free market tends towards the fair treatment of workers. And, I mean, the evidence for this is clear. If you want to look at the fact that, for instance, 95% of employees in Ireland earn above minimum wage now, that alone proves that it is not the tendency of employers to pay employees the minimum amount they possibly can. Because it doesn't make any business sense whatsoever for them to do so. That's why they don't do it. Because when you pay people well, you motivate them to do their job well. You motivate them to be productive, and that's what you want. When you pay people pittance, you motivate them to work for somebody else, basically. And individuals in this day and age are educated, are aware of their rights, and have a sense of self-worth. And therefore, they refuse to work in exploitative conditions. It simply doesn't happen. People don't allow it to happen to themselves. What we are espousing is a free market. A free market where people can offer their labour at a certain price. Employers can offer a certain price for that labour, and people can come to an agreement of their own accord. We don't believe exploitation is going to occur under this system, because we think that, considering the social stigma surrounding exploitation, considering the fact that individuals are aware of their rights, trying to exploit people is a very good way to drive yourself out of business. We absolutely accept that if you abolish the minimum wage, certain people are going to make less money. That's a fact, incomes will drop. We also think that employment will increase last. We think that rights which are currently being taken away at our border, rights which are currently being taken away, will be fulfilled, will be provided to their people, and therefore that the government will be protecting its people in the way that it is responsible to do. So we think that it is worth, taking this small drop in certain people's income in order to provide huge amounts of employment all across the board. So, what have I talked to you about tonight? I've told you about unemployment and how the minimum wage creates it in an individual and in a collective sense. I've told you about the right to work and how the minimum wage infringes it. I've told you about the nature of the free market and how it does not tend towards exploitation, and therefore how the minimum wage is essentially redundant as a means of protecting workers. And for all of these reasons, I beg you to propose. Thank you very much.
Chairperson, adjudicators, my fellow speakers, and ladies and gentlemen of the audience, my name is Charlotte Smith, and I'm here this afternoon with my teammate Catherine to oppose the motion that this House abolish the minimum wage. Now, this afternoon, I'm going to be speaking to you on two main points. I'm firstly going to be looking at the principles behind the minimum wage, this idea of social justice, and every single citizen's right to engage on equal terms with fellow citizens. Secondly, I'm going to be looking at the practicalities or the economics of minimum wage, and my teammate Catherine is going to be dealing with exploitation later on in the speech, as well as the loss of reputation. So this brings me on to my first point. Ladies and gentlemen, what the Irish government should be striving to achieve at this time is that every single person should be a member of a liberal society. Now, this means being part of a society that is based on the principles of equality and of freedom to engage on equal terms with fellow citizens. Every single person should have access to a basic set of economic rights and to a basic standard of living, allowing them to participate in society to their fullest extent. The people of Ireland should be able to go about doing the things that one should be able to do in a free and decent society without, be it education, health or housing, without experiencing shame. Nobody should be expected to live in a level of poverty that is wholly unacceptable in any liberal society. A strong minimum wage helps to reduce the gap between incomes between the poor and the wealthy, and when such a gap becomes too wide, democratic values are threatened. But the freedoms to enjoy a stable and an open society are not meaningful for those who are worn out by the struggles for the basics of life. Now, the first proposition have come up here today, and they've said that we're going to create a free market. But we are not. We are going to create a poverty trap, because every single person has a basic right to live on basic but equal terms with fellow citizens. And if the state was fulfilling its duty, we would have a minimum standard below which no citizen should be allowed to fall, a social floor of sorts. Now, this social floor, it should ensure a minimum standard necessary for a worker to provide for both himself and his family to live in frugal comfort, to uphold this core idea of social justice and the idea that every single person deserves the dignity of being a contributing member to society. Now, this is exactly what the minimum wage is in place to ensure, a living wage. And if we cut this living wage, we are inflicting poverty on thousands of families. We are ripping away their dignity and their ability to survive in society, and we're handing them shame in a place. We are belittling the efforts of the person who goes out and works very hard for 40 hours a week, only to come home and find it extremely hard to support themselves, not to mind the family. The government has a duty to try and alleviate poverty, not to increase it. And if we, no thank you. And a reasonable minimum wage is an indispensable step towards the goal of reducing poverty, along with other steps that can include things like broader health coverage and better education. A fair minimum wage is not enough to reduce poverty, but it is essential in the step towards doing so. It may not be much for the single mother who has to count her pennies. It may not be much for her, but for all workers, they are at least owed a certain amount of dignity and an acceptable standard of living. And this is undeniably, ladies and gentlemen, something which the state must uphold. Now, while the proposition may make the assertion, which they actually have, that the shame of wage cuts is a necessary move to prevent the shame of job losses, that it's better for more people to have a poorly paid job than to have absolutely no job at all, we on the opposition must disagree. Because if we abolish the minimum wage, we are hurting those who are already bordering on the poverty line. We are hurting the most vulnerable in society. And it is wrong, ladies and gentlemen, to hurt a minority, even